Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I am your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And today we have a very special guest, Wynn-free. And Wynn is most known as the author, along with David Wilcock, of The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. He has a background as a physics student at the University of California at Berkeley, and has been in contact with sources who identify themselves as the Council of Elohim. And this council has answers to some of the universe's greatest mysteries and questions. So he's also the author of The Creator Gods of the Physical Universe. He's a media guest on the topic of interdimensional communication, including he was 6 times as a guest on Coast to Coast with George Noory. He's a lecturer and workshop leader at Expos, churches, and more. And he has ongoing communication with a group soul, which we'll talk about this later, that claims to have created the universe. Dr. Lesson, are you there?
I'm here. I'm very excited to hear Wynn speak for this creator group. It's got a lot to tell us, I think.
Right, and today is, of course, Easter Sunday, and we're going to talk about Jesus on the second half of the show, probably, but we can interject at any time during the course of the show. And Wynn's partner is Terry, and his partner will probably come on the second part of the show. So without further ado, Wynn-free, are you there?
I am here. Hey,
all right.
I am so glad to be here with you guys. I don't think I've ever been interviewed by anyone with the kind of knowledge and experiences that you both have that kind of has a big crossover with my experiences.
Well, we're excited to have you here. We're going to have to ask you to speak into the mic because it's kind of like...
Wait. There we go. The mic was up on my temple. Okay.
Okay.
Is that
so?
Is
Wayne,
that better?
What would you like to tell us about? We can hear you. What would you like to tell us about your book, The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce? How did you get involved with that topic?
You know, Janet, if before we do that, could I make an overview comment about everything that's going to follow, and then go into that?
Okay. That sounds good. Go for it.
Yeah. What I want to say is that there is this idea that there is something out there that can help us, that has our best interest, that there's a God, that there's angels. And I tend to be quite skeptical. I have in the past about how all that works. And what we're going to be unfolding today is what happened to me that totally convinced me it was real. And many of the people that pay attention to my work have that experience. Because I come from a background, as Janet said, as a physics major. So I don't believe things. I don't believe channeled sources. I need some kind of deeper confirmation to validate something. And that what I want to validate on this show is that there are what they identify themselves as group souls. They're group souls. There's 2 major group souls that I have been affiliated with that have proven to me without a shadow of a doubt that they're real, they're positive, and they can do things from where they are that look like miracles from where we are. And one of these group souls has said that they identified themselves by the name Elohim. And they say they existed before there was a physical universe, and that they were a subdivision of what they call the one infinite creator, and that they created the physical universe, or the beginnings of it, and they did it by frequencies and science, and they've explained how they did it, and that they gave everything free will, so the universe would be like an ecosystem that would evolve itself. And in some ways, it's gotten out of hand. And they are available to help, but their criteria is that people have to ask. In other words, they don't violate free will. They created a free will universe, and they don't come in and take control of it. But they're available, and they can answer requests, and we've watched amazing things happen in our work. But people don't even know they're there. So part of my role, or what I'm doing, is I'm establishing extremely compelling case that they exist, and that they actually, we have 3 conference calls a week. People ask some questions, and I tell people, please don't believe any of this. Don't believe anything I just said without checking it out thoroughly, because if that's true, if I'm really talking to this source, if they really can answer requests, that's really a big deal in this realm. But you can't believe it until you get your own resonance. And I'll be telling you my story of how I spent 3 years and still trying to believe it. So that's
let me ask
you
a question. Let me ask you a question about you said you're doing 3 conference calls a week, and how are you accessing this group soul? Are they coming in through this conference call, and how are they coming in?
Well,
can you explain that a little bit better?
Yeah. Well, the whole story of this, we're leaving the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce on the side burner for a moment. But what happened to me, well, okay, this group soul that identifies itself as the Elohim has maintained a connection with me through 2 women in my life, 2 consecutive personal relationships. And one of them didn't want to do it, and the other one did. They started talking to me. They were channeling, and they said, just ask them questions. And so I did. I just asked question after question after question. Terry Brown, who is going to be on the show later, is and has worked really closely with me, helping to put this out. And on our conference calls, one way we access the source is we actually do live sessions with them right on the call.
Uh-huh.
And on Wednesday, in particular, our Wednesday call, people submit questions. People submit questions of things they're going through, issues, whatever, theological questions, and we answer them, as many as we have time to, on our Wednesday call. Now, there's another phenomena of the Elohim that I discovered in 2004. This started for me while I was in the middle of writing The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And my new friend spontaneously started a voice came through her and said they wanted to talk to me, and they said to ask them questions. And during this period of time, this was the first 6 months that I was having this experience, one of the first questions I asked is, how do I know my girlfriend's not crazy and that she's not making this up? I said, can you guys predict a newspaper headline? And then they said, watch for this headline in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, the headline occurred. So they really had my attention now. I didn't give my power up. They didn't ask me to do anything. They just said, ask them questions. So I asked
So what
questions.
are some of the other things that have panned out as proof to you besides the headline coming true?
Well, the other major event that happened in this first 6 months, the other major event was about 4 months into it, where I got a call from my brother-in-law that my sister was going in the hospital and they didn't expect her to live. And she was having an operation for cancer. So I asked them, I said, can you guys help my sister? Now, I'm not even believing, I'm just like in a sci-fi movie. I'm not believing this. I'm just saying, well, if they are who they say they are, let's see what happens if I ask this. And so they said they could help. Well, my sister survived the operation. And I actually said to myself, how do I know this is not coincidence? I'm not going to go talk about it and say I had a miracle. I'll just see what happens next. Well, 3 weeks later, my brother-in-law called me. My brother-in-law, Larry, and he said something really strange happened. He took Joanne in for tests, and the nurse said she was clean. There was no cancer in her, but there was something wrong with the test because her lupus disappeared, and they tested her, and there was no lupus. And according to Western medicine, lupus never disappears, never goes away once you have it. Well, now I'm saying, uncle, I'm saying, okay, they had to do it. And I went back and I asked them, I said, how did you guys do that? And they said, well, we projected a filter into her blood and we took the lupus out. And I mean, I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. In fact, I was also nervous. I said, if I have a source that can do this, how in the world can I use this to contribute to the lives of other people? And I didn't have a clue. I was scared to talk about it. You know, I was still writing my book, the Wilcock, the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce book, and I didn't dare. It felt to me like I couldn't dare talk about it publicly because if I did, I'd never get my book published. I mean, I'd be the biggest wacko in the world. And so, so those were two phenomena in the first 6 months. And then the woman left me. She was freaking out over it. She was having panic attacks. And after a few weeks, I called up my long-term friend, on-again, off-again relationship, but always good friend, Terry. And Terry came over, and in the middle of the night, this was like, this really happened. I got a tape of it. It's recorded. Terry will be on the line later. In the middle of the night, she woke me up and said, get the tape recorder out. And a voice came through her, said it was the same Elohim. They hadn't left me. What I was doing was really important, and I could reach them through Terry. Well, I didn't believe it. I said, there's got to be something wrong with this. She must be making it up. She's jealous. She wants to be. I mean, I went through all these things in my mind. And so for the next 2 months, we would do 3 or 4 sessions a week. And I kept just asking questions. And then I would go to some people I knew, and I said, could I ask a question on your behalf? I got this voice talking to me, and they said, okay. I started asking questions about other people, and they seemed to know everything about everyone. They could tune into it, and they were very loving. Now, when I was writing the Wilcock book, and you posted this on your website, I saw that David Wilcock, one of the things about reincarnation that I didn't know but I learned is that people look like their past lifetimes, and their DNA configuration travels with their soul. So when the soul enters the new fetus, it programs the new fetus with the DNA of the past life. Janet, are you making that noise in the background? Do you hear it?
No, I don't hear any noise. But
you don't hear any noise? It sounds like somebody rattling their phone. Okay. In any case, I don't know. Is Terry on the line? Because sometimes Terry doesn't not aware when she's making noises like that. Terry,
we can just mute in between and to minimize noise. We'll just mute, and then when we want to speak, we'll unmute. So I should just mute in between, just in case somebody's
Okay. Okay. So it's okay if people can hear. It's okay with me. I wanted to see if somebody didn't know if they're rattling their phone or something. Okay. So now I learned that people look like their past lifetimes, and that David Wilcock was the spitting image of Edgar Cayce, and his father looked like Edgar Cayce's father. People travel in soul groups and they meet the same people. His girlfriend or his friend looked like Edgar Cayce's wife. And the pictures are really, really striking. It's like no way he could fake that. There were many, many other things that tied him to Edgar Cayce. Well, now Terry, who is very shy, has got this voice coming through her that said it created the universe, and answering the most even mundane questions, not just esoteric questions, but being very, very considerate and conscientious to bring me good information. And I asked them, was Terry ever anybody famous? And I don't think they give an answer. They don't give it past life information on demand, although if they think it's in the highest interest to know about it, they'll say it. So they said to look up St. Catherine of Siena, who I never heard of. So I immediately do a Google search on St. Catherine, and I find the story of this young woman who would go into the local Catholic church, and the priests would write down everything she said because they thought God was speaking to them through her. And St. Catherine's dialogues with God are still part of Catholic history. They're still being sold on Amazon, and I mean, it's a small world because St. Catherine was channeling and Terry was channeling. And as I read St. Catherine's channelings, I found one of the things she was doing was trying to address the corruption that had become prevalent in the Catholic Church. And the thing that really floored me was that Terry was the spitting image of St. Catherine. And as I read the story of Catherine, it felt like she had the same personality. I think you posted those pictures on your webpage, yes?
Yes, I did. I had to mute to avoid noise. So everything's up on aquarianradio.com. We put a page about today's show, plus we have Wynn's bio, a couple bios. So listeners, feel free to go to aquarianradio.com and look at the page.
So it was these pictures, and there were a lot more pictures that came up of tying people to people, but these two were two really impactful things that made me believe that what I was doing might be real. And so the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce was released in 2004. And when it was released, I gave my first talk on that book in San Diego at a little expo. And as I was talking, I did not talk about my own experience. I did not talk about the Elohim. I just talked about the book. I didn't even know how to talk about the book. I had to learn how to talk about it. And I thought it would just sound so crazy if I started talking about my own experience. So, but while I was talking, there was an energy in the room. And I watched that energy. It was huge, and it was like dancing around people. And it was looked like light coming in from high. Now, I've experienced that energy before in my life, but mostly when I was sitting in a room with a particular spiritual teacher that I had. I could feel this energy come into the room. Well, this energy was coming into that room for that group of people. And when my talk was over, people were rushing out of the room to purchase books. And Terry was sitting outside at a table, and they were lining up, and they were saying things to Terry. She was not in the room. She was sitting there manning the table. They were saying things like, I could see auras. I never saw auras before. I could see light in the room. That must be what people are talking about. So I realized that it wasn't just me that was seeing it. People that never had this experience before were seeing it. And they were telling Terry. So a few days later, we did a session. And I asked them, I said, could you explain that light in the room? And they said, that was us. We were helping you. Now that blew my mind. Okay, I'm talking to this group soul that says they created the universe. They've said they could project energy into this realm, because that's what they said when I asked about my sister's healing. And now I give a talk, and they're telling me they projected energy in the room, and people could feel it. And so for the next months, I was giving talks, and people were having this experience of feeling the energy. And I asked them at that time, could you do that on a conference call? Could you project energy to the people on a conference call even when they're not in the same room? And they said they could. So I don't know if it was right then, but I put on my agenda that I'm going to start doing an experimental conference call and see what happens. So I did that. And it's the conference calls we're doing today are an extension of that first idea, that they could project energy into a conference call. And I get so many testimonials. Now, again, I got a scientist.
Wynn, in the beginning, did you ask them, would you help me sell books? Because their behavior was to go out of the conference room and buy books. Was that part of your request to them?
No, I didn't make any requests to them. Okay.
Oh.
I didn't tell them to help me sell books. I just was talking, and wasn't even thinking. You know, at this talk in San Diego, I mean, I figured I would give a talk on it, and if people were touched, they'd go and buy books. But I had no idea that I was going to get any help from the Elohim. And, you know, I started slowly but surely realizing what was happening, you know, trying to understand it with my logical mind so that it made sense to me. But I start doing it would be a mistake, and I don't think I could say, help me make money. Like, in fact, in the first 6 months, we didn't have any money. I thought what we were doing was really important. And I asked them, I said, they predicted a newspaper headline. So I said, could you help me in the horse races so I could make some money? And their answer to that was, it would send you back into patterns of past lifetimes that wouldn't be good for the work, your highest role this lifetime. And I can really understand that now. I can understand it because if I started using them to make money, people would not be coming to me for spiritual evolution. They'd be coming to help me win the lottery, help me do this, help me do that. And that is not what they're there for. A lot of people that pay attention to my work start getting more successful. They get a job, something happens. And it's not the Elohim that does it. It's that they've lifted their level of vibration so they can attract things synchronistically from a higher level into their life. But the person, me, I have to start. At one point, they made a very good analogy of how they interact with people. If we go on the idea that there's only one energy in the universe, the whole universe is one being, and at the higher realms, the intelligences know this. They know they're part of each other. And at the lower realms, like we're in, that idea gets lost because of possessions. People start feeling separate because it's either mine or yours. And so, since it's all one, a human has a potential to holographically expand. And most humans don't access this potential. There's a veil around our planet by design, and you know all the compressions and contractions from the elite that are pushed on people to keep them from expanding. But a human has a potential to expand their field into way greater parts of the universe. And when you do that, you start learning how to create from that level and have it precipitate into a physical manifestation. And the Elohim describes it as when you connect with their energy, the best way to look at it is that they are expanded you and you're a contracted them, because it's all one. It's all the same energy. And so when you start to have that kind of cognition, I mean, it's not just a mental thing. You just feel their energy. People feel it coming in through their crown chakras and starts clearing it. But it's really you. It's a higher aspect of you. You're not disempowering yourself to something that's not you. You're empowering yourself from something that is you at a higher level. So when somebody, the way they described it is like riding a bicycle. That when you pedal the bicycle has a chain and a rear wheel that takes your pedaling and turns it into a much faster motion when you're moving. And the Elohim say they're like the rear wheel and the chain, that you have to pedal. And if you pedal and you make the connection, they can leverage your pedaling. They can help so that more happens. A human is like a repeater station. Our bodies are like in this flow. It's in the field, and we don't realize it. We're contracted. We feel like the body is all there is. That's the illusion of this realm. Our senses only pick up this realm. But at the higher aspect, your body, is, as you expand your hologram, your body just becomes an earthbound way station for higher frequencies, and you start holding those frequencies, and they start expanding into your space, and other people can feel it. And you're like an antenna. You're radiating on other levels to where other people are on other levels, and you're attracting things to yourself. And these other sources, the higher sources, are just helping you to do that. They're not doing it for you. Like when I asked the Elohim, when I said, do you really like it when people worship you? They said, no, they don't. They say they're like higher level friends, and that they're not too happy at all the ways this realm has created itself, causing all this suffering. So they would like to be used to help eliminate some of the suffering here on an individual basis. And so that is what I see as one of the highest aspects of the work I'm doing, creating a liaison between them and this realm energetically. See, there's two ways they interface. One way is they have wisdom, they have knowledge, they can explain things that never have been explained before. And the other way is they can project energy so that you can feel it and you can connect with them. But they do not do that without being asked or without a person being open. So you have someone that's going to get into this has to do enough due diligence of checking it out, reading their words, and saying, you know what, I trust these guys. You have to come to that yourself. If I told you to trust them and ask for their help, then I'd be doing you a disservice. I tell people, don't even trust me. Like, kick my tires. Make sure I couldn't make this story up. I couldn't. There's too many witnesses, too many phenomena, too much internet tracking on the whole thing. But still, somebody should check it out, because a lot of times humans just jump to the conclusion and say, Wynn is just making that up because he wants to be famous or he wants to be on radio. I couldn't make it up. I got thousands of recordings of my conversations with them.
Right.
And, we do this on our conference calls. We're transparent. We do it publicly. You can listen in to how they answer questions and say, I think they're full of it, or, man, a lot of times they answer things that trigger a huge amount of growth in somebody. And, I never know what's going to happen. Our shows are not scripted. I'm spontaneous. Kelly's spontaneous. Right. The Elohim are spontaneous. And we have had amazing phenomena occur on those calls. And,
So what are some of the things that have occurred on these calls, like that are very magical, amazing phenomenon?
Well, I'm going to tell you, let me say one thing. We do have things like miracles happen, but they never happen. They never happen on demand, and sometimes the Elohim don't take credit for it. And what they have said is that miracles per se tend to cause people to give up their power, and their intent is not to cause you to give up your power, but to make you feel empowered. When somebody sees a miracle, they'll say, okay, show me, follow me, what should I do? Even when they first started talking to me, I said, well, tell me what to do. And they didn't. And I now understand how it works. not only they didn't, they couldn't. What changes this realm is the co-creative interaction between people. Let me say that again. It's the co-creative interaction between you and I. What did Jesus say? He said, love your brother, love your neighbor as yourself. That's when two or more are gathered, I am present. It's like the Elohim can add juice, but they can only add juice to the energy the energy that's here. So they do not want you to give up your power. Now, I'm just going to bear witness to some of the things I've observed on our calls. But
okay.
Sometimes when I do this, I was on George Noory, and I started talking about my sister's miracle. And on the next Sunday call that we did, which is our healing call, I think I had 200 people saying, fix me. I said, now I don't know the extent of what can happen and what couldn't. I said, maybe I can fix them. I don't know. Well, what I learned was that I couldn't fix them. And if they kept coming to the calls, and if they started picking up the energy of the Elohim, then they would have potentially had the chance to have some fixing of their own, bringing it in. But I don't do it. I just show up. With my sister's healing, which is the first thing that really hit me over the head, where her lupus disappeared, I want to share something that helped me really learn about how these guys operate. My sister got out of the hospital for this cancer operation, and I hadn't kept good attention to her for quite a few years. We hadn't spoken very often, and I said to myself, I'm going to call her every day, and I started calling her every day. And then I said, I'm going to tell you a joke, and you have to tell it to the nurses, because she was at a rehabilitation home. And so she was doing that, and she got into one of the most loving spaces that I ever knew her to be in. And the nurses would be coming around and saying, well, what's the joke today, Joanne? And she's very shy, and she rose to the occasion. So for 3 to 4 weeks, I was telling her jokes, and I called it the cheer-up committee. And then after that, she had that situation where the lupus disappeared. And the Elohim said, if I didn't tell her the jokes, they couldn't have done the healing. Because the jokes were my part of creating good vibes so that there was a way for their energy to come down and connect. If somebody is really depressed, really overwhelmed, life is tough, nobody loves me, somehow or another, you've got to inch by inch yourself out of that, because otherwise they can't get to you. You've got to at least meet it a little bit, so your energy is projected up so they can project down, okay? And it's important for me to say that, because I don't want a lot of people coming to my calls and they do the, I get emails, tell the Elohim to fix this, do that, blah, 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 and it doesn't work. I'm doing 3 calls a week. That if somebody really wants to make a shift, they should start coming to my calls. Some people that start feeling the energy, I have an archive site with 1,000 calls up on it. And it's my most visited site. Probably has about 100,000 hits thus far. And the people that get it just eat it up. They start listening to it all the time. And it's like there's an energy on the calls that starts to rub off on you after a while. And I've learned that even though I may be talking to perhaps the highest source available in this realm, that I have to keep it light and fun. If I make it somber, and then it's the fun that makes people relax and connect with the energies. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me just, I'll give you a couple of the kinds of things that have happened on our calls, okay?
Okay.
There was I'll give you a small one and a big one. There was a woman who was pulling out of her house, and she had this dog that she loved, and she ran over her dog. She backed over it, and it died. And she was in despair and guilty. And so she was on our Wednesday call, and she asked a question about her dog. And how do I get over this? And they told her that her dog was still with her. It was just walking around in the astral. When she got in the car, the dog would get in the car. It hardly knew it was dead, okay? And then she started to imagine the dog was with her, and she started getting some consolation. And then she went to the pound about a month later, and she found another dog that looked like her old dog. It was some small dog. And so she took it home with her. After she took it home with her, this dog started to act exactly like her old dog, okay?
Uh-huh.
And she couldn't believe it. It seemed to know all the routines of the old dog. So she asked the question on another Wednesday night, how come my new dog, acts like my old dog? And they said, well, your old dog, remember the old dog was following her around. Your old dog is now a walk-in. It's like, the old dog is now sharing space with the new dog, and the new dog welcomes the help because you're such a weird person. They didn't say weird. They said it's helping the new dog understand how to get along with you better, right? And then she knew it was true. I mean, the dog was responding just like her old dog, and it just blew her mind. It blew my mind. I didn't know dogs could be walk-ins, to tell you the truth, okay? And so
I guess if humans can be walk-ins, dogs can be walk-ins.
Right.
Well, that makes sense because I have a cat that I think is, maybe the reincarnation of the cat I had when I was very young, like 4 or 5 years old, and then that was the same cat I had when I was in my early 20s, and that was probably my dog I had in my late 20s, early 30s. So it seems like the same soul is following me around, whether I get a cat or a dog, and they act very much alike. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that, but that's the thought I had. So, this is Fluffy, who is now Furball. Like the name is even similar, Fluffy and Furball, although her official name is Isis. But I keep calling her Furball because she reminds me of, the first cat.
Now, on our Wednesday call, where people ask questions, oftentimes when somebody dies, they'll ask a question. Oh, here, I'm going to tell you this story, okay? On Sunday, we put people in the light, right? It's a prayer. I don't like to use the word prayer. It's like a group intention. And the power of the call is we probably have a few hundred people on the call, and then we invite these two group souls, and we haven't even gone to the other group soul. We invite them into the group energy. And this is an energy that people can feel. A lot of people have never felt anything like it. It's hard to explain because it's just like you're expanded. You can feel your chakras open. Oftentimes people email me, they feel their third eye energy in the top of their head. And we feel each other. The people that keep coming to the calls start to get affinity with each other. They know each other. They're there early on the call. How you doing? They love each other. And I'm just watching. I'm not doing this. I'm just watching it manifest. I'm just showing up and I'm learning by what happens, okay? And so now my mind went blank. We oftentimes somebody will put a soul that's deceased, that just died in the light.
The deceased,
on the Sunday call, and Terry will be talking, and sometimes they bring a message through from that. Now, sometimes they'll say that person doesn't want to be disturbed now. They're going through an adjustment period. They're leaving it alone. But other times they bring a message through, and the person knows that it's the person, okay? And one of the funniest things that happened was when Robin Williams died, everybody was putting Robin Williams in the light. That's our terminology for asking him to be worked with. And on our Sunday call, after it's a 2-hour call, after we go through everything we do, there's about a 10 to 15-minute session where they come in and give a message to the call. And they gave a message, and at the end of their message, there was a comment, and it seemed like it was coming from them, but it was really out of character. They said, it's a long journey to the land of Nod, okay? And I said, what does that mean? It's a long journey to the land of Nod. And when the call was over, I said, Terry, you think that could have been Robin? And we did a session.
Because what was the reference he had to Nod? That was something he did in his life, right?
Like sleeping. And I think he used that. He might have used that word. But let me tell you what happened. Afterwards, I said, let's do a private session and see if Robin Williams shows up, okay? Now, keep in mind, whenever anything like this happens, I'm always testing it. Even if a voice says it's Robin, I'm not going to believe it. I'm going to test it. So a voice showed up, said it was Robin. And I started asking him, I said, well, what's your phone number? And he says, I can't remember. And I said, who's your manager's name? I can't remember. Okay. I asked about 4 questions trying to get him to give me a specific answer so I could verify it was really Robin. And then he said, you know how when someone has Alzheimer's, their brain isn't functioning correctly and they have trouble remembering things? He said, imagine what it'd be like to not have a brain. So, like I said, you know what? That sounds like something Robin would say. And then he went on and said, he said some more. He didn't just start telling jokes, but I asked him questions. It's like on the call, he was saying, well, I don't know if I want to go to heaven. It sounds like it's boring, all those people playing harps, you know. And they probably won't like me anyway. I'm too raucous. And it's like we're having dialogues like that. But let me give you the biggest miraculous thing that happened on the call. And it was, I think, maybe 3 years ago, and it was Hurricane Gustav. Remember Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and it devastated it. And then there was another hurricane coming into New Orleans called Gustav, and all the news was saying it was supposed to be as bad as Katrina, okay? And so we put Hurricane Gustav in the light and asking that it not hit and cause all this devastation. And so Terry was going to do her channeling part of the session. And this was like no other channeling, no other call we ever did. She's saying things like, Hurricane Gustav is barreling down, and we're looking at Hurricane Gustav, and we're showing them all these points of lights of people praying. Now, apparently, a hurricane has a consciousness to it. And because they work with free will, they have to convince the hurricane consciousness to switch its intent from destroying the city. So they're saying things like, you know, all these people would be so happy we could take some of your energy and take it to Mount Shasta, and some of your energy and take it to Sedona, and you make so many people happy. And this is nothing like this ever happened before or since. And after about 10 minutes, they said Hurricane Gustav has agreed to drop its intensity and let us move some of the energy, and it's not going to be a problem. And I'm thinking, geez, there goes my credibility if this thing hits. And immediately after the call, I went on the internet and I'm looking up Hurricane Gustav, and everywhere it's saying that Hurricane Gustav dropped from a level 4 to a level 3, and it was actually supposed to get stronger. They don't understand why this happened. I think even on George Noory, they had some weather experts saying this was really mysterious that this occurred. And a couple of weeks later, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe, because we were on the call, a hurricane reduced its power. And I asked them, and I said, you mean if we didn't do that, it would have hit full force? And they said, yes. At another point, I asked them, can you guys disable a nuclear weapon and prevent a nuclear weapon from going off? And they said they could if enough people asked. And I said, geez, I think what I'm doing is real. And that's why I go out and talk about this stuff, because most people don't even, I mean, I would have never believed in my younger years that prayer worked. I would, the old idea that there was a God that was looking at us and saying, okay, we'll answer that prayer. Now I see how it works. I see how it works, and I've watched it work. And I don't like to use the word prayer because I'm not doing a religion. This is not a religion. This is like in the world, it's public. I use the word intention. Intention for the highest good of all concerned and honoring free will. That's how they work. And so they can add their energy to your energy when you have the connection, when you've created an energetic connection with them, and you keep the criteria for the highest good of all concerned and honoring free will, and then magical things can happen. And I've observed it enough to have no doubt that that's true. And how's that for explaining how I wrote the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce?
Well, we have like 2 minutes before the top of the hour in the break, so what can we talk about for 2 minutes, and then we'll reserve. We'll come back and start talking about the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And Sasha,
Terry, who I've been talking about, who did that session that I was just describing, if we get the phones connected right, she'll be on, and you can.
We'll call her during the break, and she'll be on. We'll do that.
Good. Okay.
Good.
Super. So
we have 1 minute now.
Yeah, what can I say in 1 minute? Okay.
I don't know, Sasha. What would you like to say?
Check out my website. Check out my website. Can I tell people to intelligence-infinity.com. You can download a book there that I wrote about the Elohim. Get on my email list. You'll get notices of my conference calls. Be curious. Be skeptical, but check it out. Okay? Intelligence-infinity.com. And what did you want to say, Sasha?
You there, Sash?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. 30 seconds.
Oh,
I saw David Wilcock at contact in the desert, but before he could talk, he had these guys come in with guns and face us down, and he said, I'm a public figure and I'm under threat, so I have to have these bodyguards to protect me from you. And so, who is this guy David Wilcock, and who is Cayce? And gosh, the guy with a gun?
All right, with that commercial break, we'll be back in 5. Thank you.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Oscar's freeze. That's just a cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows what's going on.
Heart's beating faster. Seemingly louder to breathe. The neurobiological system keeps telling it to run. It releases it to move. Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is mere insanity. Understanding danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio!
Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angel. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angel.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com. The Peace Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Jenna Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we are talking with wynn-free. Joining us the second hour will be Terry Brown, his associate. Before we get back to our special guest, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com and donate what you can, $1, $5, $15, $20, $30, $50, $100, whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donation. Your donations allow us to bring you these types of programs and more. So thank you once again for your donation. And before we come back to the second hour, Sash, what would you like to say?
Oh, yes. Before the break, I was saying how I had saw David Wilcock on the stage, and I listened to the brilliant analysis he had about cycles of time, and I just was mystified at why he was giving us wisdom quite freely and having this guy with a gun staring us down. And I was hoping that Wynn, our guest, who worked with David Wilcock and studied Edgar Cayce, could help me understand some of that.
Yeah, and Wynn, do you have any idea what was David's life threatened in some way that he had to start? When somebody had a dog, we had Stephen Greer and David Wilcock at the first Contact in the Desert conference, and it was just quite shocking to see security and guard dogs and German Shepherds and stuff. Do you have any insight into what might have happened to David Wilcock?
Well, you know what? Before I address that, I should go back to the first question that you asked me, which I then sidetracked and we never answered it, okay? I should tell you a little bit about my background with David and writing that book, okay, and why I wrote it. I ran into David's website in, I think, 1999. And at that time, I had been an Edgar Cayce fanatic. When I was in college, I probably read about 30 books about Edgar Cayce, and it was the books that changed me from being a physics major nerd into a big interest in how the universe worked. Because anyone who studied Edgar Cayce knows that he had legitimacy. He did 15,000 readings. He could diagnose people no matter where they were on the planet just by knowing their name. They could go to the doctor, and his diagnosis was almost always 100% correct, and it was very accurate. He would recommend alternative cures that no one had ever used for particular maladies before. He could tell people who they were in their past lifetimes. Now, that one's harder to validate, but people would go and they'd say, you were, I'm just saying this hypothetically, you had a life in Boston and your name was John Jones, and somebody would go find a tombstone for John Jones in the same period when Edgar Cayce said they existed. And he was bringing in past lifetimes, not just as a matter of curiosity, but because he was explaining what people did in previous lives that created some of their patterns in this life, some of their issues, some of even their diseases. And when he died, his children opened up a library of 15,000 of these readings, which were all transcribed. And from the time of his death until now, there's been 500 books written about him. There's an institute in Virginia Beach that was founded by his children. It still operates. It's called the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And so somewhere around 1999, I discovered the website of this young guy. He was, I think, 29 years old or something at that time. And he was posting all of these readings that were coming through him, and I read his readings, and I said, man, these are wise. These are really deep. And he had a little section on his website called the Edgar Cayce Connection. Now, he never said he was the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And I read his story, and I said, if he's telling the truth, he has to be the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce predicted he would return in 1998, live in Virginia Beach, and may be a liberator of the world. And David's story, the real, I'm just going to give a quick clip of this. He was living in New Paltz, New York, and he decided he was going to write his dreams down. And he put a pad by his bed, and when he woke up in the morning to look at the dreams, he found verbal snippets of messages in short sentences that were kind of cryptic sometimes, and sometimes they were extremely wise. And he thought he was making it up. But every night for the next week, he would get more of these messages. And then at a certain point, probably a week into it, one of the messages gave an extremely precise prediction of something that was going to happen to him, when it was going to happen, the day it was going to happen, and it happened. Well, this kind of blew him away. So now he started to develop the art of bringing these messages in. And he went from bringing in short snippets to page after page of transcribed messages. This was going on for a year, and he called it his dream. He called it his dream voice. And after a year, his dream voice asked him to move to Virginia Beach, which was where the Edgar Cayce Institute was. Well, he moved to Virginia Beach, and he found out he was the spitting image of a young Edgar Cayce. People started stopping him on the street, and he actually started hanging out at the Cayce Foundation. And he was a little scared of this. I mean, he started to get the feeling it was fearful that he might be the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And he asked his voice, he said, why do I look like Edgar Cayce? And his voice said, because you were Edgar Cayce, and if you study all the circumstances, you'll see the parallels. But this lifetime, we'd like to ask you not to focus on doing past life readings and health readings, but to be an educator for the masses. And so he spent the next year studying Cayce. And he found out that not only did he look like Cayce, his father looked like Cayce, his girlfriend, or his friend, she wasn't his girlfriend, but he had a good friend that looked like Cayce's wife. Cayce had that prediction. He would return in 1998, live in Virginia Beach, and maybe a liberator of the world. And he kind of matched what his source said. We'd like you to be an educator for the masses. And his astrology chart, his personal planets were in the same sign as Edgar Cayce's. One chance in 260,000 that they should be the same. And now he's got this voice coming through him that starts correcting some of the Cayce readings. And I'm reading it. I read enough about Cayce to feel the resonance. And I said, if this guy is telling the truth, and I started to check him out. And at the time, I was writing articles for a metaphysical web magazine. And I called my editor, and I said, hey, I think I found the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, and I'd like to interview this guy. And she looked at his website, and she said, Wynn, he looks like some kind of wacko to me. And I said, well, he may be a wacko, but I think he's Cayce. So the editor said, you can interview him, but I'm not going to promise to run the interview until I read it. So I got in contact with Wilcock, and I interviewed him. I submitted the interview. She immediately called me back and gasping, saying, "Oh my God, you're right. He has to be Edgar Cayce." And then she said, "I think you're the guy that's supposed to write the book about this." And I never wrote a book. You know, I spent a good portion of my life as a singer and a songwriter and a poet, amongst many other things. But that was one of the best things I ever did. And I kept studying his channelings. And I kept, let me tell you what I was learning as I was studying his channelings. Not only were they wise beyond belief, but this force that was speaking through him was explaining who they were. And they said they were a group soul that was made up of graduates of this realm, souls that got off the wheel of reincarnation, and that there were hundreds of millions of them, and they have been one of the principal sources that have been working with Earth in attempting to help the evolution of humans. They called themselves the Ra group. Now, this was not the Ra of Egypt. It was not Amun-Ra. That's a whole other story. And and I'm reading this all, and I'm saying, I don't know if this is true. This sounds like science fiction. I mean, a group soul that's graduated, and then at one point in one of the sessions, the Wilcock sessions, they said, "We came to you in Christianity, but we don't often speak in those terms anymore because of the way religion screwed it up." And I said, what do they mean? They came to me us in Christianity. Was Jesus connected to this group soul? And I kept studying, and then I'm trying to cross-reference things. And I find another woman named Carla Ruckert, who just died a few days ago. She and I became really, really good friends. She was a regular participant on my Sunday conference calls for the past 5 years. And in 1981, Carla Ruckert was a part of a channeling group. There was a PhD professor at the local university in Louisville, Kentucky, and he was very interested in metaphysical things, and he had a channeling group, and people were channeling discarnate entities, ETs, God knows what. And he asked a question, and Carla was channeling, and normally the channelings that were taking place, people were conscious while they were channeling. Well, when Carla fell into a trance, and the voice came through her and said, "I am Ra, and your questions have caused us to come through, and we have been looking for a group that we could trust to bring valuable information through to your planet." So for the next 3 years, they engaged in ongoing conversations, questions and answers about this group soul Ra. And there's a body of information there that has never been brought forth in this planet in a public way or maybe any way. The Ra group has been the behind-the-scenes positive force that's working closely with the evolution of humans. And if you read Edgar Cayce, you might know that Edgar Cayce talked about a past life he had in Egypt, and his name was Ra-Ta. Did you ever read that? Did you ever hear that?
I started reading Edgar Cayce's. When did that first book come out? It was probably like the 60s or maybe it was before that.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere when I was very young, I was born in 54, so somewhere in the 60s, early 70s, I discovered Edgar Cayce, and I read it. I read everything I could get my hands on. And I remember his story of the creation, which reminds me of what you're talking about, the Elohim, the group oversoul. And then the Ra-Ta, he said he was the incarnation of Ra-Ta. And so tell our listeners, who is Ra-Ta?
So the story of Ra-Ta, according to Edgar Cayce, is that there was a high priest in Egypt 10,000 years ago approximately, and he was doing all these miraculous healings. He was building temples for healing, and he built the pyramids by levitation. And he became known as Ra, the sun god. It was 10,000 years ago. And, of course, you can't validate that story, but I remember reading it and saying, wow, that's really interesting. Well, now I'm reading the Carla Rucker Ra material. And in her material, the Ra group says, we made a connection with a high priest in Egypt 10,000 years ago. And we worked with this high priest, and we did a lot of miracles and healings there. We even manifested bodies of light, and we walked amongst your people, and they could see us. And we built the pyramids by levitation. Well, that was the thing that made me write my book, where I said, oh my God. And David Wilcock kept referring to this, it's called the Law of One material from Carla Rucker. He kept referring to it. And I studied it up and down. And I even made a point to meet Carla. She was actually at the same UFO Congress that we met at, probably in 2001. And I drove to Laughlin because I got to look her in the eye and see if I trusted this woman, because I'm going to write this book because all the evidence is coming out looking good. And that's the incident that made me write the book. The fact that that whole thing about Ra showed up in the Edgar Cayce channelings, and it showed up in the Carla Rucker channelings, and Wilcock was putting all these wise things up that were just exactly in line with everything else. It fit. I could feel the resonance, aside from the fact of the physical resemblances, that Cayce's prophecies, the astrological stuff. And so David was on fire with the idea of how am I going to be a liberator of the world. Now, this is my interpretation of it. He was finding out that he was reaching more people through doing study, scientific stuff, ancient civilization stuff. And so in the course of doing this book, and he was my co-writer, by the time the book was finished, he did not want to talk to the world and introduce himself as the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. He wanted to talk about things that he thought would reach more people. And he was right. He was reaching more people. I mean, we all know his two books, he wrote two books. One of them became a New York Times bestseller. But my book, or the book was mostly my book, but he was the co-writer. He edited everything in it. And half the book is the messages from the Ra group. And we went our separate ways. We just, he didn't want anything to do with it, didn't want to talk about it. So I started talking about it. And in a certain way, he didn't even want me to talk about it, because he was beginning to amass large amounts of attention through talking, doing it the way he was doing. Now, at this point, he started trying to expose things. He found that he was looking for things, to disclose, so to speak, and he was ending up knowing people who he would call were insiders, and they were telling him various things that were going on in the secret governments and technology, and he started to move into being a expose journalist of talking about these things, and people were very interested, and he wasn't always right, and I had questions in myself, which I still do, if I trusted who was talking to him, and if they weren't just trying to disable him or use him. And at one,
how does anybody know that, really?
Pardon me?
How does anybody know when you're talking to channeled entities whether you can trust them or not?
Well, I'm not talking about channeled entities now. He was talking about humans who were insiders.
Insiders, okay? Yeah. So anybody. How do you know you can trust insiders, whistleblowers, and all that stuff?
I don't know. It's not easy. It's easy to get deceived, isn't it? So he was putting all kinds of stuff up. He was putting up different money deals, and he was like interviewing people like Benjamin Fulford. And I'm not sure I trusted Benjamin Fulford. And, there was this idea that because David was Cayce, he must know what's going on. But he kept putting up like prophecies of things that were going to happen that didn't happen. And it was a little embarrassing. They kept doing it. And then he it seems like he crossed some bridge where he put some things up that might have upset somebody, and he got a death threat. And it scared the hell out of him. And,
so that's where this the response to the death threat comment earlier. Okay.
That's why he went to that event and had all that protection. Okay, I would assume. I don't.
Oops. Sorry. Okay, he's trying to call you back. Pick up the phone. Okay. We lost Sash for a moment. Are you back on?
Okay.
Wait 1 second. Sasha, are you back on? You're not back on? Okay. Come in here,
I'll just keep...
We're going to have to share a phone.
Okay.
Sasha, come in here, sweetheart. We'll just put this on speaker. Okay, Okay, continue to talk. Oh, and I want to get Terry on here, too, at some point.
Terry, are you there? Are you there?
Wait. Here, what happened when I got cut off is I wanted to ask, what was it that David Wilcock said that elicited the death threat?
I am not exactly sure. It might have been talking about some big money transaction that was kept secret, and he was putting it out. It seemed to me it was something like that, okay? And, when you get into this level of bringing information to the public, you never know when you're going to cross somebody, and somebody's going to think you're a threat. And in the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, this group soul was talking to him, and David approved everything that was in there. They said things like, David, get your ego out of the way. Let our messages come through. We can stop disasters on your planet. David, it's not a good idea to focus on all the alternative news. Focus on the positive. Now, I didn't see him taking that counsel. And I saw him, when he started to say certain things, and he started to get a lot of attention, he seemed to be just focused on the attention And he wasn't channeling. He wasn't putting channelings up. He wasn't putting messages up. Now, I just read something from him just this morning on his blog where he said he's going to go back to channeling. And so we'll see what happens. But I'm not necessarily promoting David Wilcock. I'm promoting my book because the book, half the book, was the channelings that he was doing at that time. And I will stand behind them, that they are wise, they impact people's growth. You know, there was a comment on Amazon that somebody made, some of the most lucid and loving spiritual advice wisdom I've ever read. And, you know, David, the amazing thing was, David, I didn't experience David as being extremely wise. I experienced him as being extremely smart. And as I was studying Cayce, and I read a lot of books, Cayce books at that time, just so I could write this book. I did a lot of research. Cayce apparently didn't particularly like the fact that people would come over and say, okay, go into a trance, and he didn't feel a sense of personal gratification of creating what he was doing. He was in a trance, and he was creating it while he was in a trance. So he had to put his own ego aside and allow this to occur. Another interesting thing that's in the book, and everything that's in the book, David approved of. He read it, he edited it, you know. If it had to pass his approval, was that Cayce, in his life, before Cayce, was a fellow by the name of John Bainbridge. And this was in the Cayce readings. John Bainbridge was a gambler, a womanizer, and was using psychic powers to control people. And that I said in the book that David was still working out some of the John Bainbridge lifetime, this lifetime, as well as the Cayce lifetime. So people expect David to be a perfect, mild, mellow guy, that how we seem to think Cayce was. And David is not that. He's got a whole different thing. He's in this lifetime that he's working out. But
you know, this is Wynn, this is very common in the kind of psychology I do, when a person is parsed into their subpersonalities, and then I regress each subpersonality to its past lives, so they have within them competing samskaras from different lives, and so that what you're describing with David is extremely common in my practice.
Yeah. So, you know, you have to read the book. The book's on Amazon. I suggest it's a fascinating read. We've gotten great reviews. And David just, you know, it was hard for me at a certain point to market the book because David's a very strong person, and he has such a strong postulate that he didn't want to be recognized as Cayce. But what happened was in 2002, you know, we were talking about my connection with the Elohim. Let me tell you how that started. I had a new girlfriend, and we were driving from Los Angeles to Portland, Oregon, and it was pouring rain, and I did a prayer of protection. And at the end of the prayer, like a joke, I said, "Does anybody want to talk to me?" And the woman answered and said, "We're here. Do you have questions?" And I thought she was joking back because she knows I'm writing this book. But I started asking some questions, and I don't even remember what I asked. But after a few minutes, she said, "That's the strangest thing that ever happened to me." So we continued to Portland, and a couple days later, we were in a hotel, and I said, "Do you want to try that again?" And I pulled a tape recorder out, and I said, "Does anybody want to talk to me?" And again, there was an answer. And I said, how come my girlfriend can do this? And they said, your girlfriend has clairaudience and clairsentience. She came into this realm to bring these messages in, and this is an important connection. Now, I already know that you can't trust channeling. There can be negative sources. And I'm thinking maybe this is a negative source that's trying to get me off track from this book I'm writing. Because I've got the idea, as I said earlier, the Ra group was connected to Jesus. And I'm trying to put all the pieces together. And that's when I asked the question about, how do I know my girlfriend's not crazy? Can you guys predict a newspaper headline? And they did. And then for the next month, she's telling me those guys want to talk to you again. And I'm asking questions. And I'm asking all the questions about the book I'm writing, about the shift the planet's going through. And I'm getting exactly the same answers as were coming through Wilcock. And it was a little bit goosebumpy because I said, man, maybe what I'm doing is right on track, because everything was confirming itself. And then 4 months into that, I had the miracle with my sister with her lupus disappearing. And shortly thereafter, the woman left. She was freaking out. She was scared of it. And a few weeks later, I called up my old girlfriend, Terry. She came over. Terry, are you on the line? Sasha,
yes.
I can't hear Terry. On the line. Terry?
Janet?
I don't know if we got Terry on the line.
No, I can call her now if you'd like. You want me to bring her on the call now?
Yes, let's
bring
Terry
bring her in on the call. Yeah.
Let me just comment that's when you get two people channeling the same entity, getting the same results, then you can sort out each one's ego and see what's best for the channeling.
Hello?
Terry?
Hi, yes. Terry. Welcome to the show. You're live.
Okay.
Oh, hi. Hi, Terry.
Terry and Janet, we all met at the UFO convention in Phoenix a couple of months ago. And Terry and Janet had a really great connection. And I had a great connection with Sasha, and then we all started having a great connection with each other. And so I'm just telling the point in the story where I called you up and I said, I'm really suffering. I mean, Terry has been my best friend. I've known her for years. We used to go out and do things, sell things together. I mean, I really think I would be dead now if it wasn't for her in my life. And we've been on again, off again, on again, off again. And so I called her up and I said, would you consider coming over? Because I really got a broken heart. I'm trying to write this book. And so she came over. And in the middle of the night, she woke me up. And she said, get the tape recorder out. And Kelly, why don't you say what your experience was when you did that?
Well, I had gone to a channeling session with the other girl that was channeling, and I asked the question. I said, can I learn to channel the Elohim? And they said that I could. And it was like a matter of getting their frequency and tuning in. And so after the other girl left, and I was open to the experience, I had a course in how to channel from a fairly well-known police psychic. And I couldn't get Wynn interested at all in going. He'd take me there, drop me off. I wouldn't go in. But then that night, he went to sleep. And suddenly I felt on the right-hand side of my head a pressure, knock, 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 knock. And I recognized the frequency of the Elohim. And so I said, hey, this is great. We can talk, we can get to know each other. And they said, no, we want to talk to Wynn. And I said, Wynn's sleeping. And they said, we want to talk to Wynn. So I woke them up, get the tape recorder out, and they started coming through me and answering questions that he had. So it was amazing.
I mean, I'll never forget that experience because I thought she was making it up. I thought she was jealous. I couldn't, I mean, like this is like a science fiction movie. I'm only scratching the surface of what I'm sharing here, of all the things that were going on. But I'm writing this book, The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. I just spent 6 months with a woman who predicted a newspaper headline, who's confirming everything I'm writing in the book, who a source that makes a pretty good case that they caused my sister's lupus to disappear, and she leaves me. And then 3 weeks later, Terry comes over, and the same source supposedly is coming through Terry, and I said, this can't be real. This can't be real. So for the next months, I asked questions and asked questions. Now, they didn't sound the same through Terry as they did through Daphne. She said it was okay to use her name. It's like they were coming through Terry's personality, which I could identify with. But I kept asking questions, and the answers to the questions were way beyond anything Terry could begin to make up, because I kept thinking, maybe Terry's making this up. And then when I asked questions about other people, they could tune in on those people, and their answers to the questions were extremely demonstrated to me without a shadow of a doubt. They knew what was going on with that person.
Okay, was it still correlating with what the new information that was getting channeled through Terry, correlating with what Wilcock was continuing to put out?
No, wait a second. You're distorting, Sasha. Janet, can you tell me what Sasha just asked?
Say that again. I'm sorry. We're sharing one phone. I'm not hearing everything. Ask the question again.
As Terry channeled information, was the information that was coming out contemporaneously from Wilcock still correlating?
Yes. When I asked the question, it would always correlate. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes like Daphne had a lot better vocabulary than me. And so one time they said, oh, where's Daphne? Because they said I should learn more words. But
did you feel hurt, Terry? Did you when they said we don't want to talk to you, we want to talk to him, and Daphne did it better. Did that hurt your feelings?
Well, it did, but when I'm a channeler, he has to set anything personal to the side because he has to bring through it exactly the way it's given. And I learned to stack any motives that I might have or anything that might interfere with the veracity of what's coming through, so that I'm there and I just am a pure translator.
I hear you. I really think you're special, though, whether they do or not.
Oh, she is special. But you know what? You know what it is at that time, I couldn't imagine doing anything publicly with Terry. Terry was so shy, and Daphne was very articulate, very expressive, very good in front of the public. And Terry has grown tremendously since we've been doing this. Tremendously, leaps and bounds. But at the time, I didn't know where to go with it. I didn't know how to do it. It took me quite a bit of time to be able to bring this out into the world like I'm doing now, and have the confidence and have the backup with Terry to know that she could do it, to have the trust with the source that that I felt I could trust the source. And also, the biggest thing was the impact on people, because I was afraid, well, what am I going to do? Get a bunch of followers and put me on a pedestal? And how's this supposed to work? And I gradually had people coming to my conference calls, and I learned, initially I thought I was going to write a series of books and I'll just be an author. And I learned that I had to be personally transparent and vulnerable in order to get this out into people's consciousness, because nobody would believe it. It sounds too crazy. And so I had to learn how to have both the courage and the confidence, and know that I wasn't going to be attacked, because the work I'm putting out is catalytic. It threatens everything. It threatens New Age. It threatens religion. And I don't want it to do that. Man, it makes me too controversial. But it is what it is. And one of the things that I wanted to, we were going to talk about Jesus. And I can talk about a lot of stuff, but I think because Easter Sunday, how is this all connected to Jesus? And
right, that's it. We have like about 15 minutes left, maybe less.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to Jesus. What has your source told you about Jesus, this man that we're celebrating today?
Let me tell you that I have asked thousands of questions. I've done a huge amount of study on the internet. I don't just quote my sources and say, here is the truth, here's what they say. By the time I'm talking about it, I've amassed a body of knowledge. Well, one of the things was, who are the Anunnaki? How do they fit into this? Because Jesus somehow connects to the Anunnaki. And it was very interesting, because just a couple of days ago, when I was exploring the Aquarian website, I think it was that website, I saw this article that Sasha wrote about Jesus and the Anunnaki, and it matched very closely to what I had figured out. So let's go back to the Elohim. The Elohim say they're the creators of the physical universe. They used frequencies and nodes and harmonics to create points in space-time that didn't exist prior. Prior to this, it was only spirit forms. And they were creating this physical universe, and they were giving free will to everything in it. They created DNA, and we had a long conversation a couple of years ago about how the amoeba was the first expression of DNA. I think it was the first. And what happened was the Elohim spirit forms could come into this universe, and they could leave again. They could come in, they could occupy a body here, and they could leave. And so they would go back and forth, and sometimes one of them would be here, and they'd be working with the celestial Elohim and help do some specific engineering in this realm. Well, the Elohim that was coming into this realm, and they were occupying animals or the first bodies, started to experience sex. And sex brought their energy into the realm and trapped them. They couldn't get out. Now they got trapped in a series of incarnations in this realm. And in this realm, unlike the spirit realm where there's no possessions, there's no reason to have any edge over anybody else. In this realm is more fun, more easy if you have slaves doing everything for you, if you have more physical possessions. And these Elohim souls had a lot of innate ability to control other beings in the realm. And the Anunnaki, way back when, originally, were working closely with the celestial Elohim. And they started to compete with each other. They started to get into the physicalness of it all. And the whole celestial relationship started to get degraded. And by the time they were using humans and hybriding humans to mine gold, they were pretty much the fallen, you could have said they were the fallen angels, okay? That's biblically what the fallen angels were the Elohim souls that came into this realm and got stuck here and played the power card because they were here. And now we go back to the Ra group, and the Ra group, through Carla Ruckert, was talking about Maldek. Maldek was the planet in our solar system that exploded and became the asteroids. And the people, the beings on Maldek, ended up a tangled mass of souls, because the worst way to go in this realm is a nuclear explosion. It fragments your soul, it disorients you, and there was, a whole planet worth of fragmented souls glommed together, and the Ra group, the group soul that spoke to Edgar Cayce and David Wilcock and Carla Ruckert, according to Carla Ruckert, they took it upon themselves to help untangle this tangled mass. And what they said they did is they moved their souls to Earth, to the available bodies on Earth, so they could continue their evolution. Now, these available bodies on Earth, I believe, were the Anunnaki hybrids. So the Ra group moved the Nalbekians into the Anunnaki hybrids for their evolution, and the Anunnaki were not necessarily helping this group evolve. They were controlling them, they were nuking them. Sasha is probably a super expert on this, having worked with Zecharia Sitchin. And the Ra group is watching all this happen. And the Anunnaki, now this is not from my sources, I don't think. I might ask them this, but obviously the Old Testament, the gods of the Old Testament were Anunnaki, Yahweh, yes, Jehovah, and I believe the good guy of them was Adonai, who was Enki, correct?
That's right. Yes, correct.
Right. But so now you have this idea of God that is created, that of God of fear. You got to do what we say, or we're going to nuke you. We're not going to do this. You're our chosen people. You follow me. Do what I say. If somebody screws up, kill them. Cut their arm off.
That's right.
Take their eye out. All this stuff. And out of the Old Testament comes all these prophecies for a Messiah. And where are these prophecies coming from? Well, I was thinking about this a long time. Was the Ra group ending up channeling through people and trying to create a Messiah? But it's not their style to create a Messiah. They go by the law of one, and a Messiah puts somebody above everybody. So I came to the conclusion that that the Anunnaki gods of the Old Testament were plotting to create a Messiah so they could have one control over the entire population. And that was Jesus. And when I read what Sasha said, he agreed with that. Now, my take, no one else will say this but me. Remember, the only clue was in the Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, where the Ra group said, "We came to you in Christianity, but we don't speak in those terms anymore." So my take on this is that Jesus was originally an Anunnaki pawn who they were trying to create to be the world Messiah. And at some point, the Ra group took over the line. Remember, the Ra group has this great interest in all these Maldekian souls that they brought to Earth to continue their evolution. The Anunnaki are screwing it up. So the Ra group took over the line, and they then started working with Jesus, and somehow he recognized it. They were also working with Akhenaten, according to the Carla Ruckert sessions. And one of the most extraordinary things is that there's a guy that started affiliating with my group. Actually, I ran into him at a conference in Sedona. We started talking. He was 80 years old. He was a doctor, one of the founders of holistic medicine, and he lived in Phoenix. And I went to visit him after knowing him for about 3 months. And this was one of those amazing synchronistic things. I picked up a book on his dining room table called The Man Who Walked with Jesus. His name is Terry Friedman. And I started thumbing through the book, and it starts telling the story of Jesus from through the eyes of Matthew. And the book had energy on it. As I was reading it, the energy was popping off the pages. And I looked up to Terry, and I said, "You were Matthew, weren't you?" And he looked down sheepishly, because he never said this in the book. And he said he was. And now I wasn't sure it was true at that point. But I had him on my Monday night show. It's in my archives. And I became convinced that he was Matthew. And I was able to ask him questions. And he remembered, he was like looking at it just like you and I might say, I went to a certain restaurant for breakfast or something. He could remember what happened with Jesus. And he said things like Jesus would walk around with his disciples and he would tell them, "Don't tell them I'm the Messiah. I just want to be a normal guy." And then when Jesus was thinking he was going to die or leave this realm, he told his disciples, "Don't start a religion over this. Go out 2 by 2 and walk and minister to people." And when I asked Terry, "How about Peter, who on this rock I build my church?" And Terry said, "Jesus didn't say that. That was put in there by the negative." And we had a whole bunch of conversations like this. If you go to my website, you'll see Terry's book on the upper left-hand corner, The Man Who Walked with Jesus. And if you click on that, you'll go to a web page. I interviewed him. I put him on video. He's not well now. He's in a nursing home. But I had a number of things, and I don't have time to tell them to you right now, but I did a lot of due diligence checking it out. And if you go to that page and click on the Man Who Walked with Jesus link, you can sign up and get some excerpts from the book, and you can read it yourself and see if it creates resonance. And I've been putting a lot of this stuff out for free. I do 3 conference calls. I give my book away for free. And if you go in the upper right-hand corner of intelligent-infinity, we sell these amazing energy pendants. And if you click on that, read about the page. I'm not going to say any more than this. They're amazing. People have amazing experiences. There's kind of proof that they actually work. They help balance the aura. They help give people more energy. It's not suggestion. Just go to the page, and if you want to order one, just when you go to the shopping cart, put in the discount code name Sasha, okay? And the price will drop drastically. Janet, I was going to do Sasha Janet, but it was too hard. And so just put Sasha in, and that's how we support this work, if you feel like checking it out. And that's the only commercial I'm going to do. Let's go back. Sasha, do you have a question?
We have about 2 minutes, but go ahead.
No, it's interesting. I've been looking at all these different theories, people that we've interviewed, from a drunk pretending he was Jesus to Jesus never existed to Jesus is from the planet Serpo. It says so in their yellow book. Gardner says this, and everybody says that, and so forth. But the one thing that comes out that's really clear is he was trying to free us from the fear religion of the Anunnaki. And so your analysis is so right on.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, he was connecting with the higher realms. Yeah. And he was bringing through a whole, I believe the Ra group was connected to his hologram, and they were acting, as father. And they had to, keep in mind, the other person in my life here is Terry Brown. She's on the call. She's with us. And there is the idea that she was St. Catherine of Siena, and that she was channeling, and she was trying to, St. Catherine, the channelings of St. Catherine were trying to set the
that's the end of our show.
Trying to set things straight.
Thank you so much for coming on today, and thank you, listeners. Thank you, Terry. And much love and blessings to everyone.